Vera Sampson hadn't moved in 20 minutes. She stood at the edge of the grave, holding a small bundle of white chrysanthemums against her coat. The other mourners had gone. The pastor had gone. Even the funeral home attendants had packed up their chairs and driven quietly away. Only Heloise was still there, standing a few feet back, giving Vera the silence she needed. The ground was soft from 2 days of rain. Gordon's name hadn't been carved into the stone yet, just the dates, just the numbers that bracketed a life. It was 2:47 in the afternoon. 4.5 miles away, a phone rang on Donna Fick's desk. She picked up on the second ring. "Donna, it's Marcus Sampson. I want to list the Coulter Street house this week if possible." Donna paused. She'd sold 2 properties for the Sampson family over the years. She knew Gordon had just been buried that morning. "This week," she said carefully. "Marcus, are you sure?" "I'm sure. Can we do Monday?" She wrote it down. Monday. Coulter Street. She didn't ask anything else. At 2:47 that Thursday afternoon, Vera Sampson was still standing at her husband's grave, holding white flowers not yet ready to leave the only place she still felt close to him. She would not return home until 4:15. She did not know that phone call had happened. She did not know that someone had already decided what would become of the house she had lived in for 32 years. But there was something Marcus didn't know either. 3 days later, Donna Fick pulled the chain of title on the Coulter Street property. Standard procedure, she always ran it before listing. She scrolled through the records held at Augusta County Circuit Court, going back year by year looking for anything that needed to be cleared before the sale could move forward. She found it under March 11, 1993, a deed amendment. 2 names, filed as joint tenants with right of survivorship. Gordon Allen Sampson, Vera Mae Sampson. Donna sat very still and looked at her screen. Then she called Owen Presley. The next morning, Heloise Crane's daughter called her from the title company office where she worked. Heloise listened. Then she hung up and called Vera. "Vera, honey, sit down before I say this. There's something you need to know about what Marcus has been doing. And about Gordon. About something Gordon did 32 years ago. By himself. Without a lawyer. Without telling a single person." She paused. "He paid $22, and he changed everything." The funeral ended at 4 minutes past 2. By 2:20, the last of the mourners had made their way back down the gravel path. Toward the parking lot, neighbors, former colleagues from the engineering firm, a few faces Vera recognized from the church Gordon had attended since boyhood. They pressed her hands. They said the things people say. She thanked each one. By 2:35, the pastor had gone. By 2:41, the funeral home attendants had folded the chairs, loaded them into a white van, and driven quietly away through the October trees. Vera didn't move. She stood at the edge of the grave, holding what remained of a small bundle of white chrysanthemums. The October air was cool and still. Thornrose Cemetery in autumn looked the way it always did. Old stone markers half covered in yellowed leaves, the big oaks along the western fence just beginning to let go. Gordon had walked here with her once years ago on a Sunday afternoon when they had nothing in particular to do. "It's peaceful," he'd said. "I wouldn't mind ending up somewhere like this." She had told him not to talk like that. Heloise stood a few feet behind her, not speaking. 25 years of friendship had taught Heloise when Vera needed words and when she needed none. This was not a moment for words. The ground was soft from 2 days of rain. The headstone hadn't been engraved yet, just the temporary marker with Gordon's name on a small laminated card, the kind the funeral home provided. Just his name and the 2 numbers that contained everything the year he was born and the year he wasn't anymore. It was 2:47 in the afternoon. 4.5 miles away on the second floor of a brick office building on Augusta Street, Donna Fick's phone rang. She picked up on the second ring the way she always did. 23 years in real estate had made certain habits automatic. "Donna, it's Marcus Sampson." She recognized the name. She had handled a rental property transaction for the Sampson family 3 years ago, a small commercial unit on Greenville Avenue. Marcus had been efficient, decisive, easy to work with. "Marcus, good to hear from you. What can I do for you?" "I want to list the house on Coulter Street, the family home. I'd like to move on it this week if we can. Donna reached for her notepad. Coulter Street. She knew the neighborhood established quiet, the kind of street where houses sold well if they were priced right. This week, she repeated. That's quick. Walk me through what we're working with. He gave her the details. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, a covered front porch, just under an acre, original hardwood floors. The house had been in the family since 1989. No mortgage paid off in 2014. The call lasted 6 minutes. When it ended, Donna wrote in her notepad Coulter Street list by Monday. Call Marcus Sampson. She noted the time out of habit, the way she always did for new listings. 2:47 p.m. Thursday. She did not know that Gordon Sampson had been buried 3 hours earlier. She did not know that his wife was still standing at the grave. She was doing her job. That was all. Vera and Heloise left Thornrose Cemetery at 4:15. The drive back to Coulter Street took 11 minutes. Neither of them said much. Heloise walked Vera to the door, made sure she was inside, and offered to stay. Vera told her she was fine. She needed quiet more than company. She put the kettle on, changed out of her funeral clothes into a cardigan and the soft gray trousers Gordon had always liked on her, came back to the kitchen and stood at the counter while the water heated. Through the glass door of the back porch, she could see the rocking chair. It had belonged to Gordon's grandmother, a wide-armed oak rocker that had sat in the same house in Waynesboro for 40 years, before Gordon's aunt passed and the family started dividing things up. Gordon had asked for it. Nobody else had wanted it. He'd loaded it into the back of his truck the September morning they moved into Coulter Street, and when he'd carried it up the porch steps, she'd watched the color rise in his face from the effort. That chair is heavier than I thought, he'd said, setting it down, pressing his hand to his lower back. I know, she'd told him. That's why I didn't carry it. He'd laughed. Then he'd set it in its spot, the left side of the porch angled slightly toward the yard, and he'd looked at her the way he sometimes did when something felt right to him. Our home now, he'd said. Not going anywhere. That was September 14th, 1989. 36 years ago. The chair hadn't moved since. Vera made her tea, sat down at the kitchen table, looked out through the glass at the empty porch, the empty chair, the yard going gold and brown in the October light. She didn't think about Marcus. She didn't know there was anything to think about. Friday morning, a few minutes past 9, the doorbell rang. Vera answered it in her cardigan tee still in hand. A woman she didn't recognize stood on the front step, early 50s professional coat, a leather portfolio under one arm. She looked momentarily uncertain when she saw Vera. Good morning, I'm Donna Fick. I have an appointment this morning with Marcus Sampson to walk through the property. Vera looked at her. No one told me about an appointment. Donna Fick's expression shifted just slightly. The practiced ease of a professional catching herself before saying the wrong thing. I'm sorry, she said carefully. Is he your... My husband's son, Vera said. From his first marriage. She paused. My husband passed away yesterday. The silence that followed lasted only a few seconds. But it was long enough for Donna Fick to understand that she needed to make a phone call before she took another step inside that house. Mrs. Sampson, she said quietly. I'm so sorry for your loss. I think I need to speak with Marcus before we go any further. Would you mind if I stepped back and made a call? Vera looked at her for a moment. Then she nodded once. She closed the door gently and stood in her kitchen in the house she had lived in for 32 years and waited. It was supposed to take 20 minutes. That was how long a standard title search usually ran for a straightforward residential property. No commercial zoning complications, no contested boundaries, no known liens. Donna Fick had done hundreds of them. She knew what she was looking for, and she knew how fast she could find it. She opened the Augusta County Circuit Court Property Records database on Monday morning, typed in the address on Coulter Street, and started scrolling back through time. 1985, Gordon Allen Sampson. Single grantee, cash purchase. Clean. She kept scrolling. 1989, no changes. 1990, no changes. 1991, no changes. 1992, no changes. She was almost ready to close the window. March 11th, 1993. Deed amendment filed 9:14 a.m. Joint tenancy with right of survivorship. Gordon Allen Sampson and Vera Mae Sampson. Donna stopped scrolling. She read it again. Then she read it a third time more slowly, the way you read something when the words are clear, but the meaning hasn't caught up yet. The filing was clean, no errors, no omissions, no ambiguous language, the kind of document that had been prepared carefully and submitted correctly. Augusta County Circuit Court seal, file number, recording date, and at the bottom attached to the original filing a receipt. Fee paid $22. Received in full. She sat back in her chair. Joint tenancy with right of survivorship meant one specific thing under Virginia property law. It meant that when one owner died, full ownership transferred automatically and immediately to the surviving owner. No probate, no court process, no will required. The moment Gordon Sampson died, 100% of the Coulter Street property became Vera Sampson's by operation of law, not by anyone's permission or decision. Marcus Sampson had no claim to the property. He never had. Donna picked up her phone and called Owen Presley. Owen answered on the third ring. She had worked with him twice before on estate-adjacent transactions, a quiet man, methodical, the kind of attorney who listened more than he spoke. Owen, it's Donna Fick. I'm looking at a chain of title on a property on Coulter Street. It belonged to Gordon Sampson. A pause, brief. I'm listening, Owen said. I pulled the records for a listing. Marcus Sampson engaged me last week. But I'm looking at a deed amendment from March 1993 joint tenancy with right of survivorship. Both names, Gordon and Vera Sampson. 4 seconds of silence. She counted them. Donna, Owen said. His voice was even, but she could hear something shift in it, not surprise exactly, something closer to recognition. Do not list that property, and please don't call Marcus before I've had a chance to speak with Vera. You know Mrs. Sampson. I was Gordon's attorney for 15 years. Another pause. I know everything. Staunton was a small city. That was the thing people from larger places never quite understood about it. Not small in a limiting way, small in the way that meant a phone call made in one office could travel 3 blocks by lunchtime without anyone intending it to. Heloise Crane's daughter Patricia worked at a title and settlement company on Beverly Street. Not Donna Fick's firm, a different one. But title professionals in Augusta County talked to each other. They shared records, ran into each other at the courthouse, occasionally called to confirm a document that looked unusual. By Monday evening, Patricia had heard enough to call her mother. Eloise listened carefully. She asked 2 questions. Then she hung up and dialed Vera. The phone rang 4 times before Vera picked up. Vera, honey. Eloise kept her voice steady. I need you to sit down before I say this. Eloise, what is it? Sit down first. A pause, the sound of a chair. All right, Vera said. I'm sitting. There's something you need to know about what Marcus has been trying to do and about what they found in the property records. Eloise paused. And about Gordon. About something Gordon did a long time ago, before you ever knew there was anything to worry about. On the evening of March 11th, 1993, Vera had made chicken soup. She remembered that afterward, not because anything about the evening had seemed significant, but because chicken soup was what she made on cold Wednesdays in early spring when the temperature dropped back after a false warm spell and the kitchen needed the steam. Gordon had come home at his usual time, set his briefcase by the door, washed his hands at the kitchen sink, sat down at the table and asked how her day had been. He hadn't mentioned where he'd gone that afternoon. She hadn't asked. It was a Wednesday. It was ordinary. There was soup on the stove and Gordon was home, and the evening passed the way. Evenings passed quietly without ceremony, without any sign that he had spent part of that afternoon at the Augusta County Circuit Court, standing at a clerk's window sliding a form and $22 across the counter, alone, without a lawyer. Without telling a single person. Owen called on Monday morning a few minutes after 8. Vera was in the kitchen standing at the counter with her coffee, not really drinking it. She had been standing there for 20 minutes. The house was very quiet. In a way, it had not been quiet before. Not the quiet of early morning, but the quiet of a place that was missing something it had always had. She picked up on the first ring. Owen said, "Vera, I need you to come to the office, not for routine paperwork. There are things you need to know, and I want to show them to you in person." She asked if everything was all right. He paused just long enough for her to understand that all right was not quite the right question. "I'll explain when you get here," he said. "Can you come this morning?" She said yes. She thought it was estate administration. Probate filings, account transfers, the ordinary machinery of loss that required signatures and notarizations and forms in triplicate. She had been expecting this call. She had not expected the pause. She put on her coat and drove to Owen's office on Greenville Avenue. His assistant showed her in without making her wait. Owen was behind his desk when she entered. He stood, shook her hand with both of his, and asked her to sit down. Then he closed the office door. He sat back down across from her. On the desk between them were 2 sheets of paper. Not a folder, not a thick estate file. 2 pages face down, side by side. Vera looked at them. "Owen said I'm going to show you these one at a time. I want to take this slowly because there are 2 separate things here, and they are both important, and they are not the same kind of important." He turned over the first page and placed it in front of her. Deed Amendment, Augusta County Circuit Court, filed March 11, 1993. Joint tenancy with right of survivorship. Gordon Allen Sampson and Vera Mae Sampson. Owen said, "Vera, you have owned half of the Coulter Street property since March of 1993. The moment Gordon passed, full ownership transferred to you automatically. Not through his will, not through probate, not through any court proceeding, by operation of law. The transfer was immediate, and it was complete." He let her read the document. She read it twice. She looked up. He said Marcus has no legal claim to that property. He never did. There is nothing to dispute, nothing to contest, nothing to litigate. The house is yours. Vera sat with that for a moment. Then Owen reached for the second page. He placed it on the desk more carefully than he had placed the first one, not with hesitation, with a kind of deliberateness, the way you set something down when you want the other person to have a moment before they pick it up. "This is a listing agreement," he said quietly. "Marcus Sampson signed it with a real estate agent named Donna Fick." Vera looked at the page. There was a timestamp printed at the top. 3:04 p.m. Thursday. She looked at it. Owen said, "What time did the funeral service end on Thursday?" Vera's eyes stayed on the page. 4 o'clock, she said. "I stayed at the cemetery until 4:15. Owen said nothing. He did not need to. Vera sat very still. She looked at the time printed at the top of that page, 3:04 p.m. Thursday, and she understood the arithmetic of it without anyone having to explain it to her. Gordon's funeral had ended at 4. She had stood at his grave until 4:15, not ready to leave. At 3:04, while she was still at Thornrose Cemetery, still standing in the October cold with white flowers in her hand, Marcus had signed a document to sell her home. She set the page back down on the desk. She did not say anything for a little while. Then she looked at Owen. "Did he know about the deed?" she said. "Marcus." Owen shook his head. "No. No one knew except Gordon and me." She looked at the first page again. Gordon knew from the beginning, she said. From 1993. Owen said from the morning he filed it. "Yes." Vera was quiet again. In 1993, she had been 39 years old. She had been teaching 5th grade at Bessie Weller Elementary for 6 years. Gordon had been overseeing a bridge project for Augusta County, driving out to the site 3 mornings a week in his green truck with the thermos of coffee she packed for him. They had been married 4 years. It had been a normal year, the kind of year you do not remember in any particular detail, because nothing extraordinary happened, or so she had believed. She did not remember March 11th being different from any other Wednesday. She had not known that at some point during that ordinary day, Gordon had driven to the circuit court on Augusta Street, stood at a clerk's window, filled out a deed amendment form, and paid $22. Alone. Without telling her. Without telling anyone. "Owen," she said, "why didn't he tell me?" Owen folded his hands on the desk. He said that Gordon had thought about that question himself. He mentioned it when he brought the deed to my attention last year. He said he didn't tell you because he didn't want you to spend 30 years knowing you needed the protection. He wanted you to simply have it. Vera looked at the window behind Owen's desk. The October light outside was thin and flat. He knew Marcus would do this, she said. Owen said he thought it was possible. He didn't say it with anger. He said it the way Gordon said most things. Vera understood what he meant. Like a man who had looked at the situation clearly and prepared accordingly. She sat in Owen Presley's office on a Monday morning and looked at two pieces of paper on a desk, one 32 years old, one 6 days old, and understood for the first time that Gordon had been watching over her since before she knew she needed watching over. Vera looked at the envelope on Owen's desk. It was small and brown, the kind sold in any drugstore, slightly soft at the corners from years in a file drawer. Her name was written on the front in Gordon's handwriting. Not typed, not printed. Written in the blue ink he always used in the careful, even hand of a man who had spent 40 years drawing precise lines on engineering paper. For Vera when the time comes. Owen said Gordon gave this to me 5 years ago. He said, and I am using his exact words because I wrote them down, he said, Owen, when I'm gone, give this to Vera. But only if something happens. If everything is peaceful, burn it. He paused. I think this is the time, he said. Vera did not reach for the envelope immediately. She looked at it. The way you look at something you understand is about to change the shape of a memory you have carried for a long time. Owen said, before you open it, there is something else I want you to see. He reached into the folder and placed one more document on the desk, smaller than the deed amendment, a single page slightly yellowed at the edges, a receipt. Augusta County Circuit Court. Date March 11th, 1993. Amount paid $22. Method cash. At the bottom, in a notes field, 3 lines in a clerk's handwriting. Filed personally, no attorney. Grantee present to sign. Vera looked at the receipt. Owen said Gordon was 44 years old when he filed that deed amendment. He was in good health. There was no diagnosis, no legal pressure, no attorney advising him to do it. He drove to the circuit court on his own, filled out the form at the counter, paid $22 in cash, and left. He kept this receipt in a folder he labeled with your name. She looked at the date again. March 11th, 1993. Owen said, do you know why he chose that year? Vera shook her head slowly. Owen folded his hands on the desk. I don't know with certainty, he said. But I know this. Gordon told me a story once, several years ago, not in any formal context. We were waiting for a court clerk, and he simply started talking the way people sometimes do when something has been sitting in them for a long time. He told me about his mother. Vera looked up. Owen said in 1969 Gordon's father passed away. His mother had lived in that house for 31 years. She had cooked in that kitchen, raised her children in those rooms, kept that garden for 3 decades. But her name was not on the deed. Only Gordon's father's name was on it. When he died, the house went into probate, and the family, Gordon's aunts and uncles, people his mother had known her whole adult life, began making decisions about the property without her. She had no legal standing. She had nothing on paper. He paused. Gordon told me he was 19 years old, Owen said. He told me he stood in the hallway of that house and watched his mother pack a suitcase. 1 suitcase. She was 61 years old, and she packed 1 suitcase, and she left the house she had lived in for 31 years because her name was never on the deed. The office was very quiet. Gordon never told me that story, Vera said. Owen nodded gently. I don't think he told many people, but I think he carried it. And I think when he married you and brought you to that house on Coulter Street, something in him knew that he would not let the same thing happen. Not to you. Vera looked at the receipt again. $22. Cash, filed personally, no attorney. She thought about the Wednesday evenings in the spring of 1993. Gordon had a habit that year of walking after dinner. She had not thought much of it. He was a man who needed air after sitting over blueprints all day, and she had been content to stay in the kitchen, finish the dishes, listen to the radio. She had never asked where he walked. One of those evenings he had not walked. He had driven to Augusta Street and stood at a clerk's window with $22 in his pocket and a form in his hand, and he had done the one thing that would protect her from something she did not yet know she needed protection from. And then he had come home, and she had been at the sink finishing the dishes, and he had not said a word. Owen stood. He said, "I'm going to step out and give you some time. There's no rush. Take as long as you need." He moved toward the door. Then he stopped and turned back, one hand resting on the frame. "Vera," he said, "in 35 years of practice, I have seen a great many people prepare wills and trusts and estate documents. Most of them do it because they want to control what happens to their assets after they are gone. Gordon was not doing that. He was not thinking about assets." He looked at her quietly. He was making sure you would never have to fight for anything he said. Not a single thing. He wanted it to already be done before the fight could start. He stepped out and pulled the door closed behind him. The office was still. Vera sat alone at Owen Presley's desk with the small brown envelope in her hands, Gordon's handwriting on the front, the careful, even letters she had read on birthday cards and grocery lists and notes left on the kitchen counter for 32 years. For Vera, when the time comes. She held it in both hands and did not open it. Not yet. She sat with it the way you sit with something you have been waiting for without knowing you were waiting, and she looked at the thin October light coming through the window, and she thought about a woman she had never met packing a suitcase in 1969. And a 19-year-old boy standing in the hallway watching her go, and a man who spent the next 24 years making sure his wife would never have to do the same thing. Marcus Sampson retained an attorney on the following Thursday. Owen received the claim by courier on Monday morning. He poured his coffee, sat down at his desk, and read through the filing without interrupting himself. It took 12 minutes. The claim was undue influence. The argument was that Vera Sampson had manipulated Gordon during a period of diminished capacity to have her name added to the deed, thereby improperly diverting property that would otherwise have passed to Gordon's children. Owen set the papers down on his desk. He sat quietly for a moment. Then he said to no one in particular undue influence. In 1993, he picked up his pen. The response letter took him less time to write than the claim had taken him to read. He did not call in his paralegal. He did not pull additional case law. He wrote 3 paragraphs and read them back once and made 2 small adjustments and printed it. The first paragraph read the deed amendment in question was executed and filed on March 11, 1993. On that date, Gordon Allen Sampson was 44 years of age. There is no record of any diagnosed medical condition, no prescription medications on file, no physician involvement of any kind during this period. Mr. Sampson and Vera Mae Sampson had been married for 4 years. The period of alleged diminished capacity, your client references occurred at minimum 27 years after the date on which the deed was filed. The second paragraph read the original filing receipt attached here, which confirms that Gordon Sampson appeared at the Augusta County Circuit Court in person, unaccompanied, paid the recording fee of $22 in cash, and filed the amendment without legal representation. This is not the action of a man under another party's influence. This is the action of a man who knew precisely what he was doing and chose to do it without assistance. The third paragraph read, "We respectfully suggest that your client consider carefully whether continuing to pursue this claim represents a productive use of his resources." Owen folded the letter, placed the receipt copy inside the envelope, sealed it, and sent it by courier before noon. 2 days later, Donna Fick called Owen's office. She had a document she thought might be useful, she said. She kept a call log for all business-related phone contacts, a habit she had developed years ago after a transaction dispute. She had pulled the entry for the previous Thursday. Incoming call, 2:47 p.m., caller Marcus Sampson, duration 6 minutes and 14 seconds. Subject noted, listing inquiry, Coulter Street property. She had written it in her log before she knew Gordon Sampson had been buried that morning. She had written it because she wrote everything down. She sent the log to Owen's office the same afternoon with a short note. She wrote, "I record all business calls as a matter of routine. I thought this might be relevant." Owen added it to the file. He did not expect to need it. He did not need it. 6 days after Owen sent his letter, his phone rang at 10:30 in the morning. He recognized the number as the office of Marcus's attorney. The conversation lasted 4 minutes. The attorney said we're withdrawing the claim. Owen said I understand. The attorney did not offer an explanation. Owen did not ask for one. They ended the call with the professional courtesy of two people who both understood that there was nothing left to discuss. Owen called Vera immediately. She answered on the second ring. He said, "Vera, I have just gotten off the phone with Marcus's attorney. They have withdrawn the claim. There will be no court proceeding. There is nothing left to contest." A silence on the line, not a long one. Vera said, "So it's over." Owen said it was over before it started. It was over the morning Gordon walked into that courthouse. He finished this 32 years ago, Vera. We were just waiting to find out. She did not say anything for a moment. Then she said he never told me he was worried about any of this. Owen thought about a phone call from 1997 that Gordon had mentioned to him once years later. Marcus had called one evening asking about Gordon's long-term estate plans, phrasing it in the careful way people phrase things when they want information without appearing to want it. Gordon had answered politely and briefly and ended the call. He told Vera what the call had been about. He looked at her across the room, and she had asked him if he was worried. He had said no, and he had not said anything else, because by 1997 there was nothing left to worry about. The deed had been filed 4 years earlier. The receipt was in his folder. Vera's name was already in the courthouse record, already printed in the chain of title, already part of the permanent documentation of Augusta County. Whatever Marcus was asking about in 1997, the answer had already been given. In 1993, in cash, without a lawyer, without telling anyone. Owen said to Vera, "You don't need to do anything. The house is yours. It has been yours. There is nothing left for anyone to challenge." Vera said, "All right." She said it quietly, not with relief exactly, with the sound of a woman setting something down that she had not realized she had been holding. Owen said Gordon knew this day might come, Vera. He just made sure you would not have to fight when it did. That evening after Owen called, Vera went to her coat and took out the envelope. She had carried it home from his office without opening it. It had sat on the kitchen counter for 3 days next to the ceramic jar where she kept wooden spoons in a spot where she could see it from anywhere in the room. She had not been avoiding it. She had been waiting until the other thing was finished, until Marcus and his attorneys and their claims had run their course and there was nothing left between her and the letter except the letter itself. Now there was nothing left. She sat down at the kitchen table. The same table where she and Gordon had eaten breakfast for 32 years, the same 4 chairs, the same window looking out over the backyard, the same overhead light that Gordon had replaced the bulb in twice because he could never find the exact warm shade she preferred and kept trying until he got it right. She opened the envelope. 2 pages, blue ink. His handwriting, the careful, even hand she knew as well as her own. No cross-outs, no corrections. He had written it the way he did everything, thinking it through first completely and then committing to it without hesitation. She read it. Vera, in 1969, when I was 19 years old, my father died. My mother had lived in that house for 31 years. She had raised her children there, kept that kitchen, tended that yard for 3 decades. But her name was not on the deed. The court did not ask her what she wanted. She had 3 weeks to make arrangements. I stood in the hallway and watched her pack a suitcase. I was 19 years old and there was nothing I could do. In March of 1993, 4 years after the day you carried your grandmother's rocking chair up the porch steps, the day I understood that this house was yours as much as mine, I drove to Augusta County Circuit Court, alone. I paid $22. I added your name to the deed. I did not tell you because I did not want you to feel that you owed me anything. This was not a gift. It was the right thing to do from the beginning. If you are reading this letter, it means that what I was concerned about has come to pass, and it means that those $22 did exactly what they were supposed to do. You did not need to fight for this house, Vera. You never did. Gordon. She read it through once. Then she folded it carefully along the original crease and held it in her hands. She sat at the kitchen table for a long time without moving. At 9 o'clock, her phone rang. Heloise. She looked at the screen and let it ring, not because she was sad, not because she did not want to talk, but because she was not alone in that kitchen, not entirely, and she was not ready to leave the company she was in. She could not have explained it to anyone. She did not try. She simply sat. After a while, she set the letter down on the table very gently and looked out through the glass door to the back porch. The yellow light over the porch door was on the way Gordon had always left it on in the evenings. She had not changed the habit. The light fell across the old oak rocking chair, casting a long shadow on the porch boards. The chair had not moved in 36 years. She looked at it for a long time. She did not know yet that there was a photograph. She had not found it. That would come tomorrow in the bottom drawer of Gordon's desk. In an envelope, she would almost overlook a photograph taken on a September afternoon in 1989, the two of them on the front porch, the rocking chair between them, Gordon's forehead still damp from carrying it up the steps. She did not know yet what was written on the back of it, but sitting at the kitchen table with his letter in her hands and the porch light on and the chair standing where he had placed it 36 years ago, she understood something she had not known how to name before. Gordon had never told her the whole story about his mother. He had said it once, a long time ago. A single sentence. My mother lost the house after my father died. And then he had stopped, and she had not asked, and she had thought it was not the right moment and had let it pass. She understood now why he had stopped. Not because he did not want to tell it, because he did not want the story to end there. He wanted it to end here, in this kitchen, with her name on the deed, and $22 already paid. The box had been sitting in the garage since before the funeral. Vera had walked past it twice in the days after Gordon died, once looking for the extra folding chairs. For when people came after the service once, for no reason she could name just moving through the garage the way you move through rooms in a house that has become too quiet. Both times she had seen Gordon's handwriting on the side of the shoebox and kept walking. 1989 to 1995. She was not ready. She had known she was not ready, and she had let herself not be ready. That morning she was ready. She carried the box to the kitchen table, the same table, always the same table, and lifted the lid. The photographs inside were loose, not organized. Gordon had never been a man for albums. He had taken pictures and put them in boxes and labeled the boxes by year and considered that sufficient. She had teased him about it once, and he had said he could find any photograph in under 5 minutes, and she had said that was not the point, and he had smiled and said he knew. She went through them slowly. There were pictures she remembered and pictures she had forgotten and pictures she did not know existed. Gordon at a job site in 1991 squinting into the sun with a hard hat pushed back on his head. A Thanksgiving she recognized by the tablecloth. A Christmas where the tree was too big for the corner and leaned slightly to one side because neither of them had thought to measure. Then she found it. The two of them on the front porch. September 1989. The rocking chair between them not yet positioned quite right, still sitting at the angle it had landed when Gordon set it down. He was smiling, not a posed smile. The real one, the one that came when he had just finished something physical and felt the satisfaction of it in his shoulders. His forehead was still damp. Vera looked at the photograph for a long time. Then she turned it over. His handwriting. Blue ink? The same blue ink as the letter? The same careful, even hand. Her home now, too. September 14th, 1989. She read it once. She read it again. Then she sat very still and thought about a sentence from his letter. The sentence she had read 3 times the night before because it contained something she had not fully understood until this moment. In March of 1993, 4 years after the day you carried your grandmother's rocking chair up the porch steps, the day I understood that this house was yours as much as mine. She looked at the date on the back of the photograph. September 14th, 1989. Gordon had not waited until March of 1993 to know this house was hers. He had known it on the first day. He had known it watching her carry that chair up the steps, watching her move through the rooms, watching her set her grandmother's chair in the corner of the porch and stand back and look at it the way a person looks at something that belongs exactly where it is. He had known it that evening. He had taken out the photograph and written it on the back while she was in another room and put it away where it could wait. He had known it 4 years before he drove to the courthouse. Heloise came by in the afternoon, the way she had come by every afternoon since the funeral, with no particular reason and no need for one. Vera showed her the photograph. Heloise held it and looked at the front, the two of them young and slightly tired, the chair between them, the porch behind them, and then she turned it over and read the back. She said, "When did he write this?" Vera said, "The first day I moved in." Heloise looked at the photograph. Then she looked at Vera. Then she looked at the rocking chair through the glass of the back door, sitting where it had always sat in the thin November light. She said he knew from that day. Vera said, "Earlier than I knew." Heloise handed the photograph back without saying anything else. There was nothing else to say. She understood the way a woman who had known Vera for 25 years understood that some things did not need to be expanded upon. They sat together for a while in the kitchen. After Heloise left, Vera took the photograph and walked out to the front porch. She stood for a moment looking at the rocking chair. It was the same chair, the same oak arms worn smooth in the places you grip, the same slight creak when the weight shifted. Gordon had carried it up these same steps on a September morning 36 years ago, his forehead damp, his back complaining, his face carrying the particular satisfaction of a man who had done something that mattered. She set the photograph down on the arm of the chair, the old picture against the old wood. 36 years of weather and winters and mornings between one and the other. Then she sat down. The chair moved slowly the way it always had, with that small, familiar sound that had been part of the background of this house for as long as she had lived in it. She sat in it for the first time since Gordon had died, and she looked out at the yard going bare in the November cold, and she held the photograph in her lap, and she did not feel alone. The first real cold of November came overnight. Vera woke before 6 and lay still for a moment listening. The house had a particular silence in cold weather, deeper than summer quiet, more settled. She had noticed it every November for 32 years, and she noticed it now. She got up and put on her robe and went to the kitchen. The coffee took 4 minutes. She stood at the counter while it brewed and looked out through the glass door to the back porch. A thin mist was moving across the yard, the kind that came in from the Shenandoah Valley on cold mornings and sat low over the grass until the sun found it. The rocking chair was there in the gray light, still and dark against the white mist. She poured her coffee, put on her coat over her robe, and went outside. The cold was clean and sharp. She could see her breath. She moved across the porch boards carefully, the way you move in early morning when the world is not yet fully awake, and you do not want to be the thing that wakes it. She sat down in the rocking chair. It did not shift or wobble. Solid as the day it was built, solid as the day Gordon carried it up these steps, with his forehead damp and his back complaining. 36 years, and it had not moved from this spot, and it had not loosened, and it had not changed. She held the coffee in both hands and let the warmth come through the ceramic into her palms. The yard was quiet. The mist drifted. A bird somewhere in the oak tree at the property line made one sound and then stopped. Through the glass door behind her, she could see into the living room. She had rearranged a few things in the weeks since the funeral, not much, only what felt necessary. On the mantelpiece above the wood stove, she had placed 2 things and nothing else. The small brown envelope, Gordon's handwriting on the front, and the photograph from 1989. The 2 of them on this porch, the rocking chair between them the first day. She had not placed them there deliberately, not as a memorial or a display. She had set them there one evening because that was where her hands had put them, and it had felt right, and she had left them. She rocked slowly and looked out at the mist. She did not think about Marcus. She had not thought about Marcus in several days, and she did not think about him now. She did not think about the listing agreement or the deed amendment or Owen's 3-paragraph letter or the phone call that had ended with the words, "We are withdrawing the claim." She thought about a Wednesday evening in March of 1993. She had made chicken soup. She remembered the smell of it, the way it filled the kitchen on cold evenings. Gordon had come home at his regular time and set his briefcase by the door and washed his hands at the kitchen sink and sat down at the table and asked how her day had been. She had told him. He had listened. They had eaten together. She had not asked where he had been that afternoon because she had not known there was anywhere particular he had been. She had thought he had come from work. She had thought it was an ordinary Wednesday. He had gone to Augusta County Circuit Court that afternoon. He had stood at the clerk's window and filled out the form and paid $22 in cash and filed the deed amendment and driven home. And then he had sat down at her kitchen table and eaten chicken soup and not said a word. For 32 years she had not known. She sat with that for a moment. Not with grief exactly, with something quieter than grief. The feeling of understanding something about a person after they are gone, understanding it fully in your body, not just in your mind, and finding that the understanding is a kind of company. She whispered it to the cold morning air, not to Gordon, not exactly, just to the morning. $22, Gordon. The chair moved slowly under her. $22. She thought about the evening they had moved in. September 14th, 1989. Gordon carrying that chair up the steps, setting it down in this spot, looking at her with the particular expression of a man who has just put something in its right place. She had not known he would go inside that evening and take a photograph and write on the back of it. She had not known he was already turning something over in his mind, already calculating, already deciding. She had only known that it was the end of a long day, and the house smelled like dust and possibility, and Gordon was standing on the porch she would stand on every morning for the next 36 years. He had said our home now, and she had believed him, and she had been right to believe him. She held her coffee and rocked and watched the Shenandoah mist pull apart slowly as the light grew and the yard came back into itself and the cold morning opened up around her. The chair did not move from its spot. It never had.